Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pensado's Place. He's Dave. I'm Herb. The book is called The Magic Behind the Music, and the magician is Al Schmitt. You'll meet him in just a second. But first, Christmas is almost upon us, so time for the Pensado Preferred gift guide. We've got a few things in it, like the Warm Audio 15% off sale, hundreds and hundreds of dollars of savings across their entire product line. Those sales are good at all authorized Warm dealers, or go to warmaudio.com. Also in that stocking is iZotope's Nectar 3 and Music Production Suite 2. Anything you need on vocals and anything you need on recording between those two items. We love the great Wells El Rey plugin. We got presets from Serban Ghanea and Busby and Spike Stant and Alan Meyerson, Jason Evigan, and some guy named Dave Pensado. It's a good one, so check that out. On the education front, you can't do better than the Blackbird Academy and John McBride, and particularly their live course. Openings are in January and April. That means jobs, jobs, jobs. They got a great placement service. You want to do that. If you're thinking about education, you want a career in this space, that's a place to go. So go to theblackbirdacademy.com or hit karma at theblackbirdacademy.com for any info you need. And for a live event this Saturday, December 15th, Dave and I are going to be talking about the future of audio. And that's going to take place at the Westlake Pro holiday event. The event is from 10 to 4. We speak at 1 p.m. There'll be doorbuster deals, free lunch, $15,000 in giveaways, closing reception with free beer and wine. So I know that last part is important to you, and we'll see you there for that. But again, we'll be there at 1 o'clock. The future of audio, there's some things going on and changes that could be opportunistic for you. So come see us. Just RSVP at westlakepro.com. And as always, we thank you for your likes and subscribes, and click notify right there. David, what is our ITL?
Oh, it's a good one. I've got new EDM Kicks featuring my assistant, Nico Hamuei. Check it out.
Hey guys, Nico Hamuei here. I'm Dave's assistant, and I wanted to show you a couple things that I've been doing on EDM Kicks particularly. I've been working on a lot of EDM stuff lately and experimenting with a lot of things to bring punch and attack to your kick, especially that mid-top end range. So this is the kick as I got it. Pretty nice, pretty punchy low end and a nice top end. You can hear that click coming out, which we love. So what I love to do is some Blue Cat Destructor. They've got this harmonic distortion thing going, which is amazing. They have a little bit of drive here, and the main thing is how you can rectify, change the bit depth, and shape the actual distortion of the clipping, etc., that you're doing on this. You could, distort it more or less. Like I said, this is really important in getting that clipping sound in your kick. So check this out. With it, without it, with it, you can definitely hear some nice low end punch, a lot of clipping going on. That's what we like, to make it stick out in the mix. I also did a little bit of surgical precision EQing with the m.w.a, just to clean up a little bit of the low end. And with it, without it, you can hear it definitely clean up a little bit in the low end. So it'll stick out a little bit, just a little bit more in the mix. I also did a little bit of transient shaping, which helped me bring the attack of the top end out, which I really love. You can really hear the top end really just jump out at you, and that's what's going to make it stick out in today's music. So I also did a little bit of more EQing here to get the sound that I really wanted. just round out a little bit more of that attack without giving you the frequencies that you don't need or that you have a little bit too much of. So the next thing I did was add a sample. A lot of people add samples to their kicks to either give it a little bit more punch, a little bit more low end, sometimes both. So what I did was I added a couple samples, actually, a few different ones to give me a little bit of space in the low end and a little bit more knock, just to fill in on both sides what I was looking for to make this kick punch. So this is without it, and with the sample I added. So you can tell that it's in tune, so it's not really changing too much of the kick, but it's definitely adding a lot of punch and a lot of low end. So the last part is my favorite part. I took the track here and converted it to MIDI. I used Massey DRT. You can use any one of your favorite plugins to convert audio to MIDI. And I extracted the MIDI file. So I have here, as you can see, just the kick, 4 on the floor, pretty standard. So what I did was I used Kick 2, one of my favorite plugins, to do this kind of stuff. And you can, tune every part of the kick, and you have a total of 3 kicks with a sub. It's a pretty bad little plugin. A little bit of phase correction. As you can see, our favorite track control, we use it to correct phase. And then a little bit more surgical kind of low end work. Let's check it out. Without it, with it. You can really hear the low end kind of fill right out. Let me give this a little more juice. You can hear that low end fill out, but you don't lose any of the attack or the click in the top end of the kick. Without it, and with it. There you have it, guys. Those are a couple of techniques that I use to get my EDM kicks to stand out. See you next time.
It's complicated to introduce this an absolute legend, by far the pinnacle of audio engineering in our business. If I were to read his credits, it would just be the whole show and we'd be done. But what I think is more important is that for all of us in the industry, not only do we admire him, he is a good man, a mentor. He spends his time, and the humanity of him, which you'll get to know, is just amazing. The one, the only, the legend, Al Schmitt. Welcome, brother.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind.
And it's also very true. Before we get going, know that this book is something you need in your arsenal. It's really special, and while we're going to cover a lot of stuff, you'll be remiss if you don't. I don't care what age you are, if you're a weekend jockey at audio, this will tell you about how to not only sustain your career, but how much your career is more than just what you know technically. The beginning. Brooklyn boy.
Absolutely.
Came from tough beginnings, not a lot of money around. And then Uncle Harry's studio, right?
Yep.
And what I have always admired about you, and I was wondering if this was true, you got exposed to great people really early. Mm-hmm. And it felt to me like it helped inform how your bar would stay personally high. You saw what the greats did, and you aspired to be that and do that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's very fair. When I was 8, and I would go to my uncle's studio, 8, 9, 10. Bing Crosby would be there, the Andrews sisters, everybody would show up at the studio, and they all treated me really nice, like ordinary people. Mm-hmm. So I was never overwhelmed by somebody's importance or whatever, Mm-hmm. It just didn't become a big deal to me. They were just nice people who treated me. Les Paul was my uncle's best friend. Yeah. And they worked on a lot of stuff together. And so I would hang out with the 3 of them every weekend, Saturday, Sunday. I'd go over there. And they would take me to the bar with them and sit me on a stool, and I'd get a sarsaparilla. Mm-hmm. And they would tell me stories, and they'd be I'd be hanging out with the big boys. Yeah. And we'd go to good restaurants and to the fights and to the hockey games. Amazing. And all these things that my parents couldn't afford to do. Sure. So, and so they were just ordinary people to me. Yeah. And so I wasn't overly impressed by this guy was an actor, and Orson Welles, Orson Welles, he came to me and said, kid, do you believe in Martians?
Wow.
And I said, I don't think so. You know,
Right.
I didn't know about War of the Worlds at that point.
Sure.
Anyway, so people were they were people. They were like my neighbors, nice to me, and so I wasn't overwhelmed.
The other thing that I think was true of, and I'm sure it's true today, but oftentimes the music for us, I think, made us aspire to a lifestyle. From the style of the artist to how they communicate with people, how they walk, Mr. B's collars and stuff like that.
I wore them all the time.
Yeah, it was part of your,
absolutely.
Because, you've always had a sort of signature Al style, just the way you carry yourself. And I think that is a little bit lost in today's world because they don't have access to things. They have access to things on their phones, but it's different when you can interact in a studio and be private, correct?
Yeah, and I think the other thing, back then and all the time until I moved to California, everybody dressed well in the studio. Engineers wore shirts, ties, jackets. Everybody dressed really cool. And when I came to California the first day,
flip-flops, shorts.
I had a shirt and a tie and a sport jacket, and I got to work at the first day, and they wanted to know if I was going to a party afterwards. Guys were walking around in T-shirts and jeans. You didn't do that in New York.
No,
it was out of the question.
Remember when people used to dress up to fly on airplanes?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes, always. Everybody. We all did that.
Tommy Dowd, you met him at Apex. If there ever is a Mount Rushmore for engineers, your face will be first and Tommy's will be right behind you.
I don't know.
What did you learn from Tommy?
Oh my God, just about everything. I learned, his deportment and how he handled himself with musicians and how he would go out and talk to them before he'd do anything. Put the mic up and then they would go in, they'd play and he'd come out and he'd move the mic this far and stuff and it was just amazing to watch him with singers. And there were a lot of the groups back then, the Clovers and all those. And he would set them up on the mic. We used the 44DX mic, and there'd be two on each side. And then he'd go in, and he'd listen, and he'd come out, and he'd move one guy back a little bit, and he'd come back in and listen.
He moved the people instead of the mic.
Yeah. Okay. There's four of them on the mic, so he'd move this guy back a little, this guy in a little, and then he'd go in, and he'd have his balance. So these are all things that I learned from him and my uncle earlier when I was a kid, because when my uncle was recording, it was really few microphones. So they moved guys around. You had to take your shoes off because you could hear
How many tracks did they have back
then? One track.
It's
back
mono.
When I was, It was all mono.
Yeah.
It was all mono.
Was it wire recording?
No, it was on 16.
Didn't mean to insult you.
The boat basically was on 16-track acetate at 33 1/3. And you could cut like three takes on one side, and then you'd flip it over and do three.
So you were
on the
actually
other.
cutting, in a sense, direct to disc.
That's exactly what it was.
Oh, okay.
It was direct to disc. That's it.
Wow.
So tell me one little thing, because I love Tommy Dowd. One little thing you learned from him that you still use today. Can you think of something?
Well, certainly mic placement.
I was going to say.
That was probably the most important thing. Where to put the mic, how to put the mic, the difference that an inch or two can make where the mic is. Those are all things that are important.
I was going to say, as you were describing what he did, to me is when I'm in the studio with you, what you do.
Yeah.
You'll go in and you literally paint the room, and then you go back and check it. If it's not there, you'll the subtlest adjustments make.
I learned all that from Tommy, my uncle, and another guy, Bob Doherty, who was a pretty famous engineer back then. On how to record orchestras, things,
I was going to say, orchestras and big band and stuff were such a seminal part of your early upbringing, and there's nothing that says mic placement and people in the right positions and so forth and knowing how to record, where there's sections of people and people recording live and all, right? So was that a training ground for you?
It was a big training ground, and the other thing is, I was taught to go out and stand by the conductor and listen to the first rundown while they're checking notes and everything, so you can hear exactly what he's hearing. And then your job is to go inside and try to capture that.
Was there a lot of stuff you kept from the first takes?
It's amazing how much the first take is the take. You know, and I did Breezin' with Benson. We did 6 or 7 songs. I think 5 of them were the first take.
Wow.
And we'd go on
Right.
and do 6, 7 takes, and then Tommy the Puma or somebody would, hey, let's check that first take again, and bam, that was it. It had the magic.
Amazing.
And it was all about the emotion and the magic that the take has, you know? It didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be emotionally good.
But also, the engineer that set everything up had to be perfect too. I guess that engineer was you. How did you go about getting the skill and the patience to, like you thought there was a string section here today that you were going to record, and you were 4 hours early. So that's a joke.
I'm glad you told us, because nobody else would know. You're hitting them out of the park today.
But that says a lot for your skill set, because you have to capture the first take. That's hard to do.
Well, it's harder for the people recording to capture that in the first take, I think, than it is for the engineer. But, you know, I'm there 3 hours before a date. We check out all the microphones, check out phasing, make sure everybody was set right and so forth. And then as guys start to trickle in, the bass player, I'll get a quick bass sound, the drummer I'll have the drummer, the guy that sets up the drums for him, play, so I can get in the ballpark with things, so we can be off and running on the first take. You know?
Are you tweaking during that first take a little bit?
Sometimes, yeah.
Did that come from, because as you were coming up, and particularly the RCA days, probably the Apex and Fulton days, and so on and so forth, sometimes you'd have 3 sessions in a day. It'd be, you know, Ray Charles and Ike and Tina Turner and Henry Mancini.
Yeah.
So, and to this day, if you've not had the luxury of being in the studio with Al, thank God we've had that opportunity. Al's efficient. Be on time, have your diagram set, have things done, take dinner at the right time, take a break, right? You still work in a very efficient way.
I try to keep that going in that way. You know, back then, it's, you know, like you said, I do from 9 to 12, I actually did Ike and Tina and the Ikettes. Did
you leave an hour for fighting? Or no, I'm sorry. Sorry.
And then we'd take a break, and then 2 to 5, I would be doing a Gogi Grant, a singer with a big band. And then that night, I'd be doing Henry Mancini with a big orchestra. And then the next day, I'd be doing Bobby Bear, a country record. And then I'd be doing a polka record with somebody, a big polka band.
Arnswell.
That kind of stuff. And, you know, I hated polka music. I just hated it. But what I would concentrate on is getting the best accordion sound anybody ever heard. That was my job, was to get that better than any accordion player ever. So those are the things I'd focus on, and I wasn't concerned about polka music and that kind of thing that I wasn't into. I was a bebopper, so
you were.
This was the opposite end of where I was.
Yeah. The, you know, what we've been blessed to have so many greats sit to our left, and a couple things seem to be consistent that I think you're the epitome of, which is, one, it's not about perfection, it's about character, and sometimes capturing the mistake is what stands out. And 2, you got to still use your gut and your ears and your heart and get the emotion in something. Is that?
Absolutely. I remember when I first started, and Tommy Dowd was recording a group, and it was for National Records, and Eileen Barton, her name was, and they were doing a record called "If I Knew You Were Coming, I'd Have Baked a Cake," and which became a big hit. Well, there's clapping going on, you know, and at one point everybody stops, but one guy claps. But that's the take they used.
Yeah.
They didn't care about because everything else was so right.
Exactly.
And they put it out that way. The record was a smash.
Absolutely.
I mean, so that's when that was when I started learning about the emotion of a record and what, how much that is going to appeal to people. As I say, the only people who buy records because the snare drum sounds good are other engineers.
And we get them free anyway.
Yeah, right. And so, people buy it because the way it makes them feel.
Absolutely.
And,
And that will never change
I hope
in music. It's all. I mean, the stuff that cuts through and lasts and impacts people somehow touch people.
Yeah.
There's other things that can be a hit, but the ones that really become seminal. As a matter of fact, when you came to L.A., 1958, you get here, you catch the 60s and 70s movement. And you became known for the New York sound. What was the New York sound?
I think the New York sound at that point was that we used more tube microphones than they did out here on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, Telefunken distributor was there. You could buy a great 47 for $300 back then.
No joke.
Back then.
Yeah. And so we were using a lot of tube microphones. So when I came to California, I started using tubes, and a lot of guys weren't. They didn't want. They were worried about noise or tube going out on the data, and we didn't worry about those things. And so that was probably what people the Al Schmitt sound, which if there is such a thing.
Did people start calling because they wanted Al Schmitt in the New York sound?
Well, that's starting to happen. I was getting.
That's a good thing.
People were starting to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then there was a period, which is fascinating to read because I know when I was a manager and Dave got almost 100% of my the mix work that we had. A lot of times it was because we, the managers or the label, and I think this applies to you as well, really saw you guys as producers who happen to be engineers. And between trust and knowing that your feel, and you actually spent some time as a producer and as an engineer, and then came back to engineering. What was that cycle? I love you like to have the brush in your hand.
Yeah. Well, that was a good time. What happened was I was an engineer, and guys would come in, producers would come in, and I'd have the musicians out there, and we'd start, and they'd be on the phone. Talking to their bookie or a hooker or whatever, and
or CLA.
And it was like, I guess I'm the guy here, And I started realizing that I was doing a lot of the producing, and these guys were getting all the credit and the money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I finally walked up to Steve Scholes, who was my boss at the time, and said, I'd really like to get into producing, and I had been offered another job at United Recording by Bill Putman. He was going to retire a little, and so I was his guy that he wanted to bring in, and more money than I was making at RCA.
Sure.
So when I told my boss that, they said to me, okay, we'll promote you up, but you got to get somebody to do the Mancini. You got to break somebody in. So I had a friend at Radio Recorders, Jim Malloy, who I thought was a great engineer, and he wasn't doing a lot of engineering at that point, more kind of maintenance stuff. So I got him over, and then I sat with him on the first Mancini dates and showed him how we did things and everything else. And then Hank got very comfortable with him, and then they were able to promote me up to producing.
Was this a time when engineers worked for one studio and there was no independent engineers or producers? Was that, there
were no independent. Yeah, that was it was unheard of at that point.
Was
Everybody
George
works
Martin,
for a studio.
Was he the first one to kind of go independent, or was it you, George Martin?
I don't know who the first one was. I don't think it was George Martin.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think George really engineered, did he?
Yeah, but as a producer, he went independent.
As a producer, maybe, yeah. Well, there were some independent producers.
Yeah. When did engineers go independent?
Engineers went independent sometime in the 60s. And I remember when it was starting to happen, and they were paying guys $15 an hour to as an independent engineer.
Now it's back to that. But you went independent, and then, which was daring at the time, right? For you to step out and do that.
Yeah.
And then through the auspices of Jefferson Airplane and so on and so forth, you had, got pulled back in and went, oh, wait, there's more money and stuff here, right? Was that the project that transitioned you to?
When I left RCA, and the reason I left, I was doing Eddie Fisher from 2 to 5, and the Jefferson Airplane at night from 8 to about 4 in the morning. So what saved my life was I was heavily into meditation at that time, and I would go to my office and meditate for a few hours. But I had 11 artists that I was producing.
Wow.
So I had to look for songs for the artists that didn't write. You had to hire a contractor to hire the musicians, an arranger, and all that stuff. And so I called my boss on the phone back then. I won't mention his name. I think it's in the book. But and I said, look, you got to get somebody to do Eddie Fisher in the afternoon. I said, I can't do this. I'm only getting 3-4 hours sleep. It's affecting my home life. And he said to me, gee, how truck drivers do it.
Wow. Yeah.
So I said, oh, really? Well, get yourself a couple of truck drivers, because I quit. And the next morning, I turned in a two-week thing, and I was leaving, and I was off and running. I went home. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I get a call 2 weeks later from the Jefferson Airplane, and they say, look, they want to keep giving us these guys, and there's nobody there we like. And they said, okay, you can hire an outside guy. We'll give him points and so much. So they said, we liked you, and we're hoping you'd come back, since I had already started bathing at Baxter's. I said, great, okay, so that was my first job as an independent. Well, the funny thing was, I was making, with my bonus at RCA, $22,500 a year. And I was doing 11 artists. My first royalty check from the Jefferson Airplane that after bathing his factory was almost 50 grand. So I knew I had made the right.
Was that the album with White Rabbit on it?
No, that was after that. What happened with White Rabbit? They hated that record, even though there were 2 big hits on that.
Wow.
But they didn't like the way it sounded. They said it was too much echo, and and Rick Girardi was a great producer, but they just, and he was kind of firm with them. And so I was aware of all that when I started to Baxter's. So I was a little bit more laid back kind of with them. And again, we'd work from really 8 to 11, maybe midnight, and then people would start. Janis Joplin would show up, and David Crosby would show up, and it became a party until 4 in the morning.
Right.
So we weren't really getting much done. Right. And before that, I would do an album 2 or 3 days. Okay.
Not here.
But back 5 months, one album.
Yeah.
But it paid off for me.
Yeah, for sure.
And so then I started doing all the Airplane records and Hot Tuna. And,
I love the Hot Tuna.
Then I was getting, I got back a little in engineering, and I was getting calls from, Neil Young to do On the Beach with him. And
what was the first Neil Young record you did?
On the Beach.
Oh, On the Beach.
Yeah. And then there it is. There's Neil. And then Jackson Browne, and I mixed for Every Man with him, sure. And then we got along really well. And when it came time to do Late for the Sky, I co-produced that with him and so forth. So I got back into it that way.
But one of the things that may be a lost art, because the game has changed, that you're describing without saying, is that trust is an important part of a relationship. These people wanted you or stuck with you or came back to you because they trusted you. And with Jefferson Airplane, they're partying in front of you and they're trusting you. And then there's other people who don't want people around. And I always say you guys are psychologists in ways that people don't understand. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely.
And you learn that
you
along
learn
the way.
quickly who you can deal with and how you can deal with them. They're like, and it's not a put down, but it's like handling a bunch of kids.
Yep.
In a sense, you know who you can be firm with and who you can have to.
I say that as a representative.
Pat on the back and stuff like that. So
it's true.
Yeah.
You refer to that as the code between engineers and artists and producers, and in my world today, that's incredibly valuable to me. I can't work with somebody that doesn't know the code.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Really
For
important.
you, what does the code mean today?
Well, the code means that you're working with someone that trusts you and you trust them, and you have a relationship, and they know, if you're the producer, they know that whatever you're doing is for their best interest, not for your best interest. So I think that's it. You know, the records, the artist is the most important part of a recording. There's a reason their name goes on the front. And if you're lucky, as a producer or an engineer, if you're lucky, your name goes on the back. Sometimes it goes in a little sleeve in the middle, you know? So it's an artist's record, and they have to trust you, and you have to believe in them.
Even today in the book, you still applied the code, didn't you? Because like there's no really like gotcha moments in the book. You're not ratting anybody out or saying this guy was a drug addict and an alcoholic. You still use the code.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's some things that happen in the studio that don't ever go outside.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it's the way it should be, I think.
Just as an aside, this book, I read it last night, cover to cover, and it truly is amazing. The balance between the stories, which are incredible, your biography, which is incredible, and then the technical information is, I don't think you can get that anywhere else. And then the technical information is as modern as anything else, but yet you get insight into how things were done a long time ago. And I think that's beautiful. I think any engineer that doesn't know whose shoulders they're standing on should just quit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, speaking of that, and shout out to Maureen Droney, who is a great coach. She did our book as well too. She co-wrote with us, and she's an engineer and a bright lady, and she cares about our community, and she allows, I think, all of us to feel good about. You know, in this case, we're the artist.
Right.
Yeah, you were the artist, and you have to then trust somebody. And speaking of insight, so how does Al Schmitt listen? How do you listen? Because you like vinyl.
Yeah, absolutely. At home, I listen to vinyl.
Is it because it's warmer, or it's just?
I just like the way vinyl sounds. I also like the fact that you listen to 16 minutes of music or so, and then you have to get up, turn the record over, and put the needle back down and sit back down. I kind of like that. You know, I mean, it's kind of like history.
You and our friends, you know how much I love you and respect you. Vinyl sucks. 18 minutes aside, you can't get any bass on the damn shit. You can't get any high end.
I don't know. You haven't been listening to my records.
Oh man,
just good comeback. That's a Brooklyn boy here.
I consume his records, violently consume his records, but the limitations of vinyl. I didn't become a good engineer until CDs came out because I didn't have an opportunity to get all the things I had in my head to come out of a pair of speakers until CDs. I'm surprised.
See, I just the opposite with you. I think CDs suck.
Yeah.
You know, in general, I mean.
Record wars.
Yeah, exactly. I really do. I think, you know.
But the limitations of vinyl cannot be denied. Produced incredible work. You know, I think creative people need limitations in a narrow lane to stay in, and vinyl certainly did that. I like vinyl too, but as an engineer, I just wanted more low end. I just wanted more that dynamic range. The dynamic range on a record is not very good.
Yeah.
As you get to the inside bands, the quality just goes to crap.
Well, that's why you don't go all the way in. You know, you only put 3 songs.
Well, the hole's there for a reason, isn't it? You're supposed to reach the hole.
Yeah.
You're watching a learning lesson, right? Teach, master, teach.
No. Al knows
when I started, there was only vinyl.
Absolutely.
That was it.
Absolutely.
There wasn't any other way to get a record. And I got to tell you, the first CDs I heard when they were coming out sounded like shit. There was all this high end on stuff and cranking up the low end and just so out of balance and proportion.
I'm glad you heard my records.
But
remember they had DDD, and that was supposed to be like the greatest thing ever. You know, that period of time was bad.
When you work mostly at Capitol, correct?
Yep.
what do you monitor on? Do you have the same things at home, or do you listen at home?
Well, I have similar at home, not exactly the same. But on the cover of the book, you can see I have these are Doug Sax Mastering Lab speakers. They're 10 or a 10-inch driver in the center, and his crossover and his cabinets. And I've been using them for about 15 years now, and I love them.
We'd be remiss if we didn't pay homage to Doug Sax. He was your mastering engineer forever, one of the greatest ever.
He was the king.
Left too soon, but boy, what amazing work.
He was the best.
He did.
Al, speak to the relationship that an engineer should have with their mastering engineer, because for me it was Eddie Schreier who helped me along. And how did you and Doug work? Like, he would call you sometimes and say, "Hey man, if you do this, I can do this."
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a couple times when Doug, I would always go to the mastering, but there are a couple times when Doug said, "Al, you can do this better.
That's what
You can do a better mix than this."
That's what you do.
And I would look at him. He said, "Was this late? Did you, or whatever?" And I would go back and remix it and get a better mix. He was, not only was he my mastering engineer, but he was a dear friend. And he would come by the studio, and I did some direct-to-disc records with him that he produced. It's important to have a good relationship. There's a lot of Ron McMaster, who just retired from Capitol, is another great guy, and will tell you, he'll be honest with you, because they're your friend, and they want you to look good. And there's certain things maybe they can do to make that happen, and they tell you about it.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Who do you use now? Who do you use now for mastering?
I'm using Eric Bollinger, who is
the bakery.
Doug at the bakery, Doug Sax's disciple. And I love Eric. He's a great musician. He plays violin, and you'll see him on dates playing violin.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Wow. Good guy,
and
too.
He's a good guy, personable guy, and he cares about what he's doing. And if I get something and I'm not happy, and I'll call him. First thing I ever did with him, he sent it to me, and I listened to it, and I called him on the phone, and I said, "I got the ref." I said, "Would Doug Sax send me a ref like this?"
Wow.
Boom.
And he said, "I don't think so." Okay. And he redid it, sent me he took off all the stuff he was doing and took it away, and gave it, which is what I wanted, which is what Doug did. Doug would, once in a while, he'd add a little something up at the top end and trim the bass a little, but that was it. Everything was cut almost flat. And I would go, and the reason I would go is I wanted to make sure that things were done the way I heard them.
Do you have do you have a mixing philosophy that goes past finding the emotion and stuff like that, or is that kind of what would be Al Schmitt's mixing philosophy?
Well, I mix really fast, so I try to get things done as quickly as possible. So, especially if it's something I recorded. And, again, and Dave knows that I don't use EQ, so there is no EQ on the recording. And
Well, you're setting me up here,
it's
Alan.
rare that I ever use it when I'm mixing, if it's something I recorded. So, I get to a spot where, like, a bell goes off, and okay, that's it.
And then you know when you're done?
Yeah.
So, Al, why don't you use EQ? Was it because you never owned one?
When I started, we had one equalizer. It was one cinema equalizer. We had no compressors. But cinema equalizer, and it was in the rack. And if you patched it in, it equalized everything because everything was mono. So you couldn't just equalize the bass, it just affected everything. So we didn't use it. So that's Tommy Dowd and my uncle and all the other people. That's how we equalize, by putting a brighter mic on an instrument or putting a warmer mic on the instrument to get the sounds we wanted.
If you want some low end on on an instrument, what mic would you choose for that? And what mic would you choose for some high end if you wanted that?
Well, it depends. There's so many great microphones. The 47 is a great microphone. The 67, the Neumann mics, the 49 is another great mic. They have, not only do they have a great low end, but they have a great top end. They have it all. But to just use something for brightness, I don't know. It would depend on what the instrument was and what I was trying to capture.